Speech is the most natural interface humans have, and turning audio into text and text into audio reliably at scale in dozens of languages is not something you want to build from scratch. The Azure Speech and Foundry tools has it covered. Hi, I'm Rob Folkrod, a lead technical trainer at Microsoft, and in this session, we'll cover developing speech-enabled apps with Azure AI Speech. This time we will work with the Azure Speech and Foundry tools to create speech-to-text and text-to-speech. We'll look at audio formats and the voice catalog and shape the output with speech synthesis markup language, SSML. So let's get started with the session. So we've already taken a large language model and used it to generate text-to-speech and speech-to-text. And so here we're doing this again. And this is the second time we've seen this kind of duality in terms of having two systems that are capable of doing the same thing. But when we're using the Azure Speech tools that are inside of Foundry, there's a couple of reasons we may focus here instead of what's inside of the large language model. First and foremost, when we're using these tools, you're generally going to have more predictable latency and cost at scale. Large language models, a little bit less predictable, a little bit slower in their creation of either the audio or the text. You'll also have very explicit control over the voices and the audio formats. If you did the last lab and the last exercise, as a matter of fact, if you ran it a number of different times, even generating the exact same text, you got back subtle differences every time. And in some cases, that's perfectly acceptable, but there are other cases where we really do need this predictability. We also see a little bit easier auditing and logging of what we have in these tools. When you're using the large language model, you're getting back the audio file or the audio results, but not a whole lot else. Here, we're going to get a little bit of metadata that told us what went well or what didn't. So troubleshooting can be a little bit easier here with these tools. Now, on the trade-off side of things, the system doesn't have the ability to kind of reason about intent or understanding of the text. You're just going to get a very consistent translation each time. So the tools that we're going to be looking at in this section, specifically, we're going to be digging into these two, mirroring what we saw in the earlier section. And a little bit later in the course, we'll take a look at voice live and speech translation. But the patterns we've seen up to this point are very similar. The pattern we've seen before is going to repeat itself here. When we were using the text analytics tool, we saw that we were using the same endpoint, whatever your Foundry resource is, .services.ai.azure.com. And just like then, we had two different ways of providing credentials. You can either use the Foundry project API key, or preferably, you could use an Entra ID to authenticate. Either one of those, you're going to pass that information in to what is a speech config. And this is going to be the jumping off point for whether you're creating text-to-speech or speech-to-text. Either one, you will start by creating that speech config. So all of these things are going to really come together inside that speech config. Then that speech config is going to be the connection to Azure Speech. There also could be an audio config. So we need to know whether we're bringing information in from the microphone or in from a file, right? In the cases of trying to synthesize, let's back up a step. Okay. Once you have your speech config, then you can make a decision whether you're converting speech to text or the other way around. In this scenario here, we are taking speech and converting that into text. So we're going to have our speech config object that we just saw on the prior slide, but to that, we will add an audio config. So the audio config is going to be determining where does the audio that we are converting to text come from. Is that a microphone? Is that coming in from a file? You will often see that this is used when we're doing a lot of text creation. So we may have batches and batches of these files that are being used. Once we have both of those objects, we will come together to build the client that is really doing the real work. In this case, the speech recognizer has a number of methods that we can use, and the one that we're looking at right here is the recognize once method. When you call that recognize once method, it'll take in whichever audio file or the microphone output, and it will return to you the text transcript, right? This is the reason that we're calling the method in the first place. But we're also getting an additional collection of metadata that goes along with it. This is where that additional troubleshooting or logging information can come from, because it's more than just here's the transcript and we're done. This is the process that we went through. This is the process that we went through. So we will see things like, well, how long in seconds? What is the duration of that? What are additional properties? And the reason for the output. So reason could be things like, hey, we did not recognize speech, or there's no match, or canceled. Those would be the negatives those would be the negatives if there was some sort of problem. Now we'll take that and just pivot just a little bit to get the text-to-speech side of things. So same speech config object that we saw before. There's our credential. There's our endpoint. But now we're passing in the audio output config. So this is where should that information be sent when we're done. Right. Then we will pass into that the text. Right. And then from there, it will then send that audio stream to our output. Again, that audio stream could be going down to file, or that audio stream could be sent directly to a particular speaker or something to play immediately for the user in the case of an interactive application. Same type of metadata that we're going to get back, right? The audio stream, again, the reason that we're calling this in the first place is for that stream, but also additional properties and the results. Now, using that previous method, you're going to get very standard output in terms of what does that speech sound like. Every time you call it, you're going to get the same thing. But there are times where you're going to want to have far more control over what that output looks like. And in those scenarios, there's an additional ability. There is a function called speak SSML. SSML is speech synthesis markup language. So here we can create an XML document that has the details about not only what should be said, but exactly how it should be said. So you'll see we've got a number of different parameters that we can pass into that XML document. So we can pass in the speaking style. Right. There are what are called neural voices, which we could say, I want this to be excited or sad. In the XML, you could also include things like a pause or silence in those sections. There may be some words that we have to spell out phonetically. Right. So class example, at least in my world, is every time I pass in my last name, I'm going to get something like foul crud, which is not great. So passing in the phonetic spelling does make it a little bit easier on occasion. We also have things like prosody. Prosody We also have things like prosody. Prosody is the speaking pitch, the range, the speed at which the words are uttered. We may have scenarios where we want to say as something. So for example, if we pick a standard American zip code, this could be said as 48,111, which isn't really how we say our zip code, so we can say we wanted to say that as back that up again. We also have the ability to use say as. And so, for example, using a standard American zip code, we could say that as 48,111. But using say as, we can say it as part of an address, as a zip code, so that it's said the way that we would normally say 48111 when we were referring to that particular code. We also have the ability to have recorded speech or background audio also included over the top of the top of the content. And so all of that, this SSML string, that XML document, is passed in to the speak SSML async. All right, let's take a look. In here, we're going to just do a quick example where we synthesize both text and recognize speech after doing just a little bit of setup work. Let's take a look at our little development environment here. We have already deployed our project, and with our project came all of the language tools and that we needed. So we just need do a little bit of configuration here for our environment. And in our environment, I'll bring this right back up again here. We need just to give it in essence, the resource name. So we know that is demo 4790. We see that right up here. We also know that it took the default resource as the name. I have curly braces there. I don't need curly braces there. Those can go away, and we can do a save. So just the endpoint to where this is going to live. Then we can dig into the code. And in the code, we've got a couple pieces of functionality, and both of them start the same. Both of them are going and grabbing the Foundry endpoint. And from there, we actually are grabbing the Foundry key, but we don't need the Foundry key in that case. We're using the default Azure credential, and we are then doing the speech config. Right, the speech config is being passed with the credential there and our endpoint, and we can do all of the work here. So most of what we've seen over and over again has been client, client, client. Here it's just the configuration object. And then we're building a little menu structure, right? This is just straight up Python. We will have 2 bits of functionality. We will be able to record a greeting for a voicemail. We will be able to then transcribe any voicemail messages that we might have. So we'll press either 1 or 2 for the cool stuff. But let's take a look at the record greeting first. We are passing in the speech configuration object and then getting a message written out for us to, in essence, transcribe. We will create a little file called greeting. We will do so. We will create a audio configuration. That audio configuration will be pointing to the output file. And then the speech config, we will go a little bit further, and we will then put the name associated with it. And we will create then a speech synthesizer. The speech synthesizer will then take those 2 pieces of information, the audio config and the speech config. They will both be passed in for us to then use the speech synthesizer. So this is our new client right here, speech synthesizer, speak text. We will pass in whatever greeting, and that's going to be our result. Right, so let's give that a shot for starters. We will open up our terminal here, and Python, and voicemail, there. We want to record a greeting. There's a greeting. Hi, this is Rob. Probably teaching class right now. Leave a message. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks. You can see, I should have probably pointed this out, but the greeting file was not there a second ago. We are now writing to that file. We've just finished. We're going to let go of the file here. And let's take a listen. Here we go.
Hi, this is Rob. I am probably teaching a class right now.
Yeah.
If you would leave a message, I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so that great voice. I probably should have paid slightly more attention to the voice in that one. We'll close greeting out. Let's go back. Serena, perfectly fine voice. Let's try. Let's go with Stefan. There is a pre-configured list. I'm not just grabbing names at random, but the pre-configured list there. So we will grab Stefan's voice. We'll do the same thing, just for grins. And same message. The file is going to just be overwritten, so you continue to see the greeting file there. We'll let that finish up. Thank you. We will exit, unlock the file, and now with just a quick little voice change.
Hi, this is Rob. I am probably teaching a class right now. If you would leave a message, I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks.
Yeah, welcome. And being a Midwesterner, there was a lot of syllables there in the word probably that we don't always hit here, but that's okay. That's fine. It's good. It's good. Good. We can actually take, just for grins, let's take a copy of that, and we're going to drop that into messages. We might as well have that transcribed as well. So we'll take a look at the second half of this, which is given some messages, can we get a transcription of those? So the second portion of this is the transcribe message. Transcribe message was passed the same speech config that we saw earlier. It's then looping through the meeting, the messages directory, and for each one of those, it is pre-playing the sounds. Right? Once we have heard them, once you and I have heard them, then we are creating an audio config. The audio config is taking the speech SDK audio config, specifying the file name, that path, and a speech recognizer. Speech recognizer is getting past the speech config and the audio config from up above. And then our speech recognizer recognize once. And then we will print out the transcription if it works. So we'll do a quick little save there. I don't think I changed anything, but we'll do it again. We'll give this a run into voicemail. We will hear each of the messages prior to it being transcribed. Let's go ahead and transcribe our messages.
Hi, this is Rob. I am probably teaching a class right now. If you would leave a message, I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks.
So that is now being sent to the system.
Hi, this is Ava. Just calling to remind you about your appointment tomorrow. Call me back on 555-123-456 if you have any questions.
Then we get Ava's message being transcribed now. We'll go immediately.
Hi, Adam here. Are you still on for coffee this afternoon?
Yeah, I am, Adam. Thanks for asking. So there we are. There's all of our three folks. All the transcriptions are set up. And again, this is just using what we would, in the past, we had called our cognitive tools, but the ones that are built, then now packaged up alongside of Foundry, but no models were being used here. No large language models were being used. There we have pre-built models that were used for these purposes. Right. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you back in the deck. All right, so there were a lot of class names. Let's see how much you remembered here. So first and foremost, what information do you need from your Microsoft Foundry resource to consume it using the Azure Speech SDK? Right, only those two things, the endpoint and the key is the option here. A secondary option might be to also use an Entra ID credential. Either one of those would work, endpoint and key or endpoint and credential. Which object should you use to specify that the speech input to be transcribed to text is an audio file? Right, that's the audio config. You may have been leaning toward that speech config. We kind of made a big deal of it, but in this case, the audio config is handling the audio file output. How can you change the voice used in speech synthesis? Right, and here you're going to set that voice name inside of the speech config. All right, so just to do a quick little review here, in this section, we looked at the Speech SDK for both text-to-speech and speech-to-text. We used a couple of classes in there, the speech config as the conduit to get back into Azure, and then depending upon which direction we were going, either the speech recognizer for speech-to-text or the speech synthesizer for voice and format options. And then if we really needed to get particular about how things were said when we were doing text-to-speech, then we could bring in SSML to mark that up. In this session, we taught our apps to listen and to speak. We worked through speech-to-text and text-to-speech, then shaped natural-sounding output with voices. Thank you for participating in this Develop AI Apps and Agents on Azure course. I hope you enjoyed learning about Azure AI Speech as much as I enjoyed presenting the concepts and walking you through it. I encourage you to remain curious and continue exploring new capabilities. That's how you'll keep growing. There are many ways to contribute to your learning. I invite you to search for your next favorite topic on Microsoft Learn at aka.ms/learn.